So there's no doubt about it. This video is 100% being made out of obligation and not really coming from a place of passion. I don't really want to do a video like this. I take no joy in it. And frankly, at this point, I'm feeling pretty burned out on the whole thing, and I don't really want to deal with the fallout of a video like this and what a video like this causes behind the scenes. Talking about things like this in the way that I do, which is opinionated and hopefully entertaining for those of you who are watching it, has cost me business relationships as well as just in general relationships within this sport. I don't have a massive media company backing me up and behind me. This is all me. This is all David, pretty much. This whole thing. I don't have any business relationships to fall back on in case I piss off the wrong people with what I say. Pretty much I personally bear the brunt of everything that I say on this channel. So when I criticize the sport, I do so with great personal risk to my access to the sport. And I have to weigh, the odds of, what's best for me personally and also what's best for my viewers. And I have to risk assess more and more so as the channel begins to grow and I get more and more recognition within the sport about what I criticize, what I talk about, because it's all seen, it's all heard, and it all comes back to me one way or another. When I speak on these issues, I do speak from a place of passion. I speak as a fan, which of course is short for fanatic. I'm fanatical about auto racing, and I love IndyCar like I love a family member. But I'm also speaking as someone who saw enough positive elements in this sport, enough potential for growth in this sport to pursue a career in it, independently, self-funding this whole media enterprise, to bring the sport that I love to as many people as possible through my unique brand of content. I am not a rich man. I think a lot of people misinterpret who I am, what I am, because racing, of course, has a perception that if you're involved in it, you've got a lot of personal wealth, you're playing with funny money. That is not me. I earn money through YouTube, and I earn money through working in racing. And I put probably way more than I should back into this channel and covering racing. In particular, I've spent the most covering IndyCar. So in some ways, and I'm not saying I have more stake than anyone else, certainly not. In fact, I'm probably on the low end in terms of actual spend on trying to promote IndyCar or talk about IndyCar from a monetary standpoint of anyone. But I can tell you this, that percentage-wise, I'm up there in terms of how much I've thrown into the sport. And because of that, if the sport fails, I fail. And so I'm kind of coming at a lot of this from that angle. But pretty much over the last, let's be honest, the entire offseason, I've sat back and I've weighed my options. I've looked at some situations such as like the video game, and I said, what can I say about this that will benefit me in the long term? And that's very, very selfish of me. And I will admit that to you guys, my viewers. Because I've come to the realization now that I should not have done that. I should have made a video about every situation that has happened in IndyCar racing this offseason. Because I have an obligation to those of you, which now numbers over 89,000 folks, who want to hear my thoughts about IndyCar racing and where it is. And I wouldn't have you guys here if I didn't have that responsibility to bear the burden of what will result from what I say. So to meet my obligation to you, my viewers, who have meant so much to me and who I would not be anywhere in this sport at all without you guys, we're going to talk about this and I'm going to be frank, and I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be fair. I mean, if there's anything that anyone who's honestly watched my content and come in with positive intentions, I can't imagine that you've ever come away from one of my videos and said, this guy doesn't have the right intentions for making this video. That's just an ethical thing for me. I'm disappointed when people think otherwise. But yeah, we're going to stick to the facts in this video. Yes, I'm going to give my own analysis and my opinion of those facts. But at the end of the day, the facts are what they are. I'm not making anything up in this video. We're just talking about what's going on. And, I want to say positive things. I don't want to make, believe it or not, I don't want to make negative videos. I want to be excited about the future of auto racing, and particularly my favorite form of it, American open wheel racing, otherwise known as IndyCar racing. I don't want to pile on. I'm not taking glee in being the next in a long line of media members who are making similar content to this at this time. But the facts of the situation do not support me having a positive outlook on the state of the sport right now. This video has to focus on the facts. So we'll start with that. Obviously, the offseason started early, as it always does in September. And what should have been an extremely positive announcement, which was the 2024 schedule, which had a great announcement that Milwaukee, after so many fans made such a noise that they wanted Milwaukee back. We finally got Milwaukee back. Labor Day weekend, a doubleheader. But that was overshadowed by two things. One thing that was not in IndyCar's control, but the hit didn't hurt any less, was that Texas Motor Speedway, after, again, from a great effort from IndyCar and the technical committee, putting on the best race of the season at Texas Motor Speedway, will not come back for 2024. Obviously, again, that wasn't IndyCar's fault. That was more Texas Motor Speedway and NASCAR. But the hit hurt. The thing that did hurt and could have been controlled differently was the Thermal Club. And I felt fairly positive on the Thermal Club thing because I understood what it is, which is it's an exclusive, not for you event. Now, there's obviously criticism of whether or not IndyCar, which is predominantly a spectator sport, should be doing club events. I agree with you on that, but at the end of the day, they're trying something new. They're going to pay the winner of the race $1 million, and it's on NBC for anyone to watch. Now, we'll talk about it a little bit later in more depth. The messaging maybe could have been better, but the fans took it the way that the fans took it, which is they saw, this is going to cost me $2,000 to go to an IndyCar race. This is unacceptable. This is more expensive than a suite ticket at the Indianapolis 500, XYZ. And, a new event immediately has a black mark on it in the majority of the fan base. And something that was already going to be a tough sell, which is a club event, really is now a tough sell. It obviously got worse. November 7th, the video game, which was being produced by Motorsport Games and came as a surprise to almost absolutely no one, was suspended. The video game is now not coming. Not that many were surprised by that, but it was finally confirmed that it was not coming on November 7th. Just after that, NASCAR, the Cup Series, with very, very little promotion, sold out Iowa Speedway. Obviously, IndyCar has a heavily promoted event at Iowa Speedway, which has yet to sell out. It has been a good crowd there, but not to the hype level that I think anybody really wanted it to go to, and certainly not selling out on the first day of ticket sales being available, unlike NASCAR. And that's a very difficult thing to reconcile, especially with the sponsor Hy-Vee, affiliated with the Iowa race. Took about a month, but more bad news came and really started what to me has been the worst week IndyCar has suffered since the merger. December 2nd, a story appears in motorsport.com. Pato O'Ward calling once again for a new chassis. He's done this. If you've spoken to Pato O'Ward in the last 2 years, you will have known that Pato O'Ward has been calling for a new chassis. Not necessarily new information to anyone who is in the sport, but caused quite a ruffle in the fan base, as it should. I think correctly, the fans, the drivers, the teams, whoever has identified that a new chassis is desperately needed in IndyCar racing. December 4th, 2 days later, Racer.com. Mark Miles is quoted in a story which states that the hybrid takes priority over a new chassis. Specifically, the quote is, "I don't think a new chassis is going to get in front of the line at this point. When it might become relevant, I don't know." Direct quote from the article written by Marshall Pruitt in Racer.com. December 7th, 3 days later, the Indy Star publishes that the hybrids will be delayed until after the Indianapolis 500. IndyCar later confirms that in a press release and does not give a specific date as to when the hybrids will actually make a debut. Forbes magazine did an exclusive interview with Mark Miles, where, among other things, he said that the hybrid works, and the only thing that is delaying the hybrids being implemented is supply issues. Alexander Rossi said in the same week on his podcast that if they had run St. Pete with the hybrids, 4 cars would finish. I'll let you decide who you believe in that particular discussion. And then the real big story, the real big hit, is that Racer.com published on December 8th that Honda is threatening to leave IndyCar after 2026, stating in particular the return on investment. The costs are too high for what Honda is putting in and getting out of it. And in particular, behind the scenes, it's pretty well known that Honda is the biggest, if not the only major proponent for IndyCar to have hybridization on their engine. And the fact that not only did the 2.4 liter engine get thrown out last Christmas time, and now this Christmas time, the hybrid also is in quite a bit of flux. But the hits kept coming, because just recently, in fact, this week, another article, bombshell, in Racer magazine. Again, the marketing director for Honda, Chuck Shifsky, was quoted essentially proposing that IndyCar move to a spec Ilmor engine, similar to what the NASCAR Truck Series uses right now. Honda would remain involved, or is willing to remain involved, but rather than build and provide engines for teams, they would provide electronic software to compete. Essentially, that would be how the manufacturers would compete with each other, would be through the different ways the electronics would be designed. The software would be designed for the engine, similar to what Formula E currently uses. We'll talk about that here in a bit. But here's the thing, and part of my struggle personally talking about all of this over the last few months. None of this has been a secret in the industry. The entire industry has been aware of pretty much all of these things for months and months. I was speaking about 3.5, 4 months ago to a higher up in one of IndyCar's top 4 teams. And essentially, this person laid out to me that the hybrids were for sure going to be delayed, most likely not going to debut at all in 2024, to which I responded, in this conversation. I said, well, shoot, that means Honda's not going to be too happy about that. And this person responded, correct. That is why IndyCar is looking at supplying the entire field with Ilmor engines. And this was 3.5 months ago when I heard this. And the fact that it's all come out, it's crazy that Honda was the one to suggest, the first one to acknowledge the Ilmor plan themselves. That's quite interesting. But, to the fan base, this was a surprise. Because of messaging. And I think a big part of a lot of why this has all spiraled out of control as quickly as it has, because I that's something that I've been shocked about, is just how quickly this has kind of gone downhill. How quickly this went from 0 to 100, where it went from everything was, it wasn't great, but everything was moving along smoothly, to now all of a sudden everybody's asking really, really tough questions behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. I mean, all you have to do is read a racer.com comment section. I'm sure if you read this comment section, I'm sure it's full of people who are unhappy, unsure, scared of what's going to come next. And I wouldn't blame you at all. And let's talk about a few of the things that have come down the pipe that just messaging might have helped a little bit. Obviously you can't unring the bell of the hybrids being as much of a problem as they have been, and the fact that directly ties to whether or not Honda is interested and invested in continuing with IndyCar past 2026. But you talk about the Thermal Club. The fact that race was talked about at all, like it was going to be open to regular fans, that was always a mistake. I feel that should have been always like, just admit that you are racing at a country club, and then what I would do is, rather than sell $2,000 tickets, add to the promotional cost of the event, say, hey, we're going to do some contests for the fans, and we're going to give out some tickets to lucky fans. You get to be the lucky fan who gets to attend this uber secret, behind the scenes race that only is going to be seen on television. I think fans would have gotten behind that and been a lot more interested and invested about the potential of winning free tickets to something, rather than being told, well, if you'd like to attend this race, that'll be $2,000, please. That's my personal opinion, but I feel like that could have been messaged better from the jump. You just got to be, intellectually honest with people about what you're trying to do is. And in the Thermal Club, what you're trying to do is you're trying to appeal to the members of the Thermal Club and try to get them involved in IndyCar. And to do that, you've put on a race. And that race is going to be great for the fans, because it's going to be exciting to watch drivers race for $1 million and have that be on NBC. There's a lot of positives in that. But unfortunately, the message wasn't controlled, and it's become just another negative mark on this offseason, when it really didn't have to be, in my opinion. The video game. And frankly, the video game, I mean, it's kind of funny to me. Two of the things that are most important to me as a fan going forward with IndyCar racing, and I've said this for years, by the way, this is not anything new coming from my head, were a new chassis and a new video game. And those are the two things that you hear the most from the defense force online, that claim that these are the least important things that IndyCar could be focusing on. And yet I'll give you an example of why it's so important. I noticed that the benefit of the doubt was extended to Penske Entertainment for a very, very long time throughout the process. So COVID gave them an awful lot of excuses as to why things were not moving forward as quickly as other racing series, and understandably so. They got stuck with a bag of turds with COVID. And people were very, very patient with Penske Entertainment and IndyCar throughout that time. A lot more patient than I or other people within the sport were. But the moment I noticed the gloves came off with the fans, the moment I noticed the benefit of the doubt was finally gone, was the iRacing thing. And when the iRacing thing was mishandled, and the messaging was, well, we've got a video game coming. We got a video game coming. Up until like a week or so before the video game was officially canceled, there were still articles in the media where Mark Miles and others were quoted as, the video game's still coming. We're happy with the progress. When, again, the industry and anyone paying attention to the stock price, the layoffs at Motorsport Games, the just general way that that company was doing business, could see that there was no way that video game was going to happen. And, you know, I said this at the time, and maybe that was one of the things that got people pissed off at me. But it's the truth that there couldn't have been anything more damaging to the young IndyCar audience than that iRacing blunder. I mean, that hurt a lot. It hurt a lot. And it's something that's going to be very difficult to reconcile going forward. Same thing with the chassis and the hybrids. The messaging is always, everything's fine, everything's fine, everything's fine. Until suddenly an announcement comes out that everything's not fine. What a whiplash to the fan base. Where if there was a little bit more transparency, I think there wouldn't be as much whiplash. Certainly, you know, you don't want to just come out and give away trade secrets, but it seemed like every time there was questions publicly about the hybrid or a new chassis, it's like, we love the current chassis. We have this many passes per race. We're good. We're good. We're good. The hybrid, oh, it's going to make the racing so much better. The manufacturers are great. They're feeling great. It's all reliable. It's all great. And then we find out that that's not the truth. A lot of it's messaging. A lot of the problem is messaging. One thing that messaging can't really help is the fact that Honda is threatening to leave. There's no way to spin that positively. Honda is one of, if not the only, major partner left in IndyCar racing that is forward-facing, meaning they're not totally business to business. Honda is a company that wants to promote their cars through IndyCar racing. That's great for the sport. I wish there were 50 other companies that were invested and as interested as Honda is. Losing them would be a tremendous blow to IndyCar. Tremendous. It would be hard to fathom, hard to put into monetary value, hard to put into any kind of a value, what kind of a loss that would be. The only way I could say it is it would be monumentous if Honda left. And I don't think it's looking very good, because the suggestion that Honda made, which is to go to a spec engine, my interpretation of that, again, this is my interpretation, could be wrong, is that Honda is essentially expressing that they don't have faith in IndyCar to execute a new formula that meets their return on investment demands. And certainly that's coming from board members that are much higher up than the people running the racing program. They look at an expense sheet at the end of the year and they say, we spent how much in IndyCar racing? And the engines aren't even electrified? What the hell are we doing here? I understand that. It's a difficult position to be put in. But to me, Honda suggesting that they're going to slap their logo on the engine cowling and then do electronic work on it, software, data work on a spec engine, that sounds like an easy out to me, because all you have to do is scrape the stickers off and copy and paste Ilmore's proprietary software into the spec Ilmore engine for that engine to continue to work if Honda wants to leave. That's what that sounds like to me. 2026 is a massively important year. in racing. It's the debut of the new Formula One regulations, of which Honda is a part of, by the way. Honda making a deadline decision of 2026, which is, of course, when their contract runs out, but that is massively important. That is the new deadline, as far as I can see, for the future of IndyCar and what it looks like and what it is going forward. I can tell you, as someone who has, I think stakeholder is probably the wrong word, but someone who is invested in this sport because I believe in the sport. I've lost a lot of that belief recently, for sure. But I don't think it's like gone. I don't think it's like so far gone that you can't bring it back. I mean, this is what I would suggest. This is what would get me excited again. And I can answer that question. The series usually does a State of the Sport address, a press conference at St. Petersburg. What I would like to see at St. Petersburg is, a transparent discussion with the media, and by extension, that means they're communicating with the fans. Essentially saying, look, this has been more difficult than we anticipated. Here's why. Here are the reasons why. And then essentially, I would like to see them totally clean sheet what IndyCar racing is going to be. Essentially say, look, we're going to lock the regulations in. We're going to keep sticking with the 2.2 liter engines until 2026 with the DW12 chassis. But when we get to 2026, guess what? We're going to have a brand new chassis, and we're going to have a brand new engine formula, and we're going to execute that. And this is our contract to the IndyCar fan, or something like that. Contract with the IndyCar stakeholders, something like that. Certainly a new chassis formula, whether that's, it's not going to be multiple chassis, but just say Dallara. Dallara can make a new car. Show a rendering, have someone draw something up at Dallara that looks super, super cool and futuristic, while still retaining some of that IndyCar DNA that we like so much about the current IR18 design. And you got to come with I think you've got to clean sheet the engine formula. If you go with Honda's suggestion to go with a spec Ilmor engine, I think you've got to be the anti-Formula One. I think you got to throw out the V6s. You've got to, if it's going to be turbocharged with a hybrid, it's got to be more than 8 cylinders. It's either 8, 10, or 12. The car needs to be a screamer. It needs to be loud. It needs to be snarly. It needs to make a sound that will draw people. People hear that at St. Pete, they're going to run to the fences to see what's driving around that racetrack. You're not going to beat F1. You're not going to have any F1 market share. You're not going to gain any F1 market share by describing your series from a technical standpoint as, yeah, we race twin turbocharged hybrid V6s, because that's what F1 runs, essentially. I think there might be a single turbo formula, but regardless, a V6 engine, not necessarily something, if it's spec, of course. If they just decide the spec engine is the 2.2 liter Chevy Ilmor, oh boy, my faith is a lot less. The other thing I would suggest, which I was going to suggest anyway, in a much less serious arena, I was going to do a new Professor Know-It-All video. But obviously this is not the appropriate time to do something like that, but I'm going to do it in a very serious tone, is frankly, I think one of the most obvious solutions would be to try to converge, adopt, or make some sort of a Formula Indy globally, and converge with Super Formula, have Ilmor build an engine to those specs and call it a Chevy, and then all of a sudden you have not only Honda and Toyota, which are currently participating in Super Formula, which have an engine that can plug and play right away with a Super Formula type car, but you also would have potentially Audi, Mercedes, and BMW, which I believe the BMW engine's actually in the GTP car right now. So there's some engine manufacturers that would be plug and play if they so desire right away, just by adopting that formula. But just on the basis of, if you merge your rules with Super Formula and Chevrolet builds a motor for it, you would have Honda, Toyota, and Chevy right away as options for that formula. And then you'd have options internationally. It's easier for a company like Honda to sell to a board to say, hey, this engine will race in Japan. It will also race in the US. Hey, let's start a European series too. Something like that. I think that would be some really outside of the box thinking that would be really cool. And I mentioned GTP. I know there's a ton of different, reasons why it wouldn't work, but, stranger things have happened. Why not adopt the GTP engine formula? Why not, pay IMSA a finder's fee and be like, hey, we would like to adopt this. We think it's good for the sport. Penske, Rahal, Andretti, Ganassi, all already involved in GTP racing. They have experience with those engines. I'm sure Dallara has a lot of smart people working there. I'm sure they could come up with a chassis design that would work with most, if not all, of the GTP engines. And then you're talking about other opportunities like Alpine, Lamborghini being potential engine suppliers in IndyCar. And if you adopted the GTP, what's stop it? Why do you have to do promotional fees at that point? Just say, hey, come one, come all. If you have a GTP eligible engine, stick it in the back of an IndyCar. Let's go racing. But I think you've got to announce something soon, and we've got to be excited about the future here in IndyCar, because while I think the 500 is going to be fine, 500 is going to be fine. I mean, I've got a really positive, believe it or not, I have a really positive video coming on the Indy 500 and just what's going on behind the scenes there. I can't tell you how excited I am for the Indianapolis 500 this year. But the series itself, being honest, looking at the facts, is in big trouble right now. And I'm hoping and praying there's a solution and it's positive for everybody. So I hope this has been as objective and has come across as coming from the place of love that I mean it genuinely to come from. But thank you guys for sticking with me. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to reading the comments section on this one. We'll see you in the next video.